Um, all right. In that case, then we'll start this recording in 5, 4, 3, 2, and a 1. And we are recording, so the show is going to get started in 3, 2, 1.
It honestly feels like a betrayal just to be standing here talking about her.
Okay, let's go. Let's go.
Hello and welcome. Welcome and hello. This is Wait, You Haven't Seen. It's a show where we talk about movies, and specifically, we talk about a movie at least one of us has never seen before. I'm your host, Travis, aka TV's Travis. This is episode number 217, and our movie this week is 2018's Hereditary. And here to talk to me about it from the So Wizard podcast, it's Mark. Mark, how you doing?
I am good, Travis, man. I am so glad to take part of So Wizard Month again because we had such a good time whenever we did it before. So I'm very excited to come in and show that So Wizard isn't all just um, Joey hating on Julia Roberts. There's different levels to the podcast.
Definitely, yeah. And it was 2 years ago, and when you came on a couple years ago, I got to show you Event Horizon for the first time.
Yes, yes.
And that was a trip, right? Because you hadn't seen that, and it's a movie that I very much enjoy after not liking it when I first saw it. So you brought this time around Hereditary, which is a movie that had passed me by. I had not seen it either. And 2018, written and directed by Ari Aster. So what, if any, history do you have surrounding this movie?
I don't know why I pick horror movies when I come to your show because I am not a horror movie fan at all. Uh, but my uh, my friend Beat Him Down from Cult 45, the movie podcast,
Mm-hmm.
he was surprised that I had not seen this movie when we talked about it about a year ago. And he's like, Mark, you have to see Hereditary. And I'm like, all right, I'll put it on the list and I'll get to it eventually. But I haven't seen this one. I hadn't seen Midsommar, so I haven't been a part of this huge like horror renaissance, the smart horror or the new horror renaissance.
Sure.
I am a fan of Scream, of the Scream franchise.
Mm-hmm.
And when they were talking about elevated horror in Scream 5, I'm like, well, maybe I should, at some point check out some of this stuff. Uh, that's, I guess they call it elevated horror. So yeah, Hereditary is one of those movies that's been in my wheelhouse, and this seemed like it's one of those things where if I don't watch it now, then who knows when the next opportunity is going to come. So
Right.
I'm very excited for this invitation.
Yeah, and sort of like you, I am a fan of horror movies, but I don't. They tend to be the thing that if I'm going to miss a movie, it's usually something horror related. Not so much because I don't enjoy them or I don't seek them out. They're just not always top of mind. And what I have found, elevated horror is an interesting term because I get it, and part of me kind of likes it in that it's an easy way to it's an easy shorthand to give somebody. But I also don't like the term because it makes it feel as though non-elevated horror is somehow lesser than, or the people that enjoy it are lesser than, and I don't subscribe to that at all. Even if you're not a fan of horror, like, people can still enjoy horror and it's perfectly fine. But there's something to, a movie like this, or there's some of these other. Midsommar is another one. So another Ari Aster. The Witch,
Yes.
Lighthouse, where they have these horror elements, but they're not a traditionally horror film the way that you would think of like a slasher film or a ghost story or something like that. They're these psychological deep dives that have horror elements woven into them, and
Right.
they're very, very interesting. So I hadn't seen this. And it's been one that, same thing. A lot of people have told me, "Oh, you gotta watch Hereditary." Everyone except for my co-host on the Gore podcast, who's in the chat right now, Faye Lynn, she did not like Hereditary at all. but outside of that, everyone keeps telling me, "Oh, it's great, you got to watch it," and all this kind of stuff. And then when it was mentioned, I'm like, "Perfect, this is a great opportunity." Because kind of like you, if I don't bring a movie if I don't do it on a show of some type, it's kind of like I will never get around to it because I have so many other things going on. But
Right.
boy, am I glad I got a chance to watch this because this was something else. This 2018, written and directed by Ari Aster. This is his feature film debut.
Blew my mind. How much talent does this guy have to come out of the gate like this? Just amazing.
Yeah, I mean, yes, he'd done some shorts and whatnot, but a feature film debut, and he just comes out swinging for the fences and goes
Yes.
for it. And okay, so I always like to kind of start with the cast of a movie, and this movie has quite the cast in it. How in the hell did Toni Collette not even get nominated for an Oscar or a Golden Globe or something for this movie? Because good Lord, she was amazing in like everybody's great in this, but there was something, her
hmm
performance was out of this world.
Yeah, I didn't. She was the only person that I knew was in this movie. Obviously, because she's on the posters and all of the trailers. I didn't realize Gabriel Byrne was in this movie. I'm like, oh, now if he's in it, that means that there's actually some, because Toni Collette, she can. Let's be real, she can be in almost anything. She can play in any genre. Her appearance doesn't necessarily mean that the movie's going to be amazing, but for some reason, seeing her and Gabriel Byrne together, I'm like, okay, there's a little bit of substance to this. This could be good. And the actor who I can't think of his name, but he was in the Jumanji reboots. He plays Peter,
Oh, Alex
and he
Wolff.
was in yes, Alex Wolff.
Hmm.
He was in, I want to say, Pig with Nicolas Cage,
That's right.
another good actor. I saw him and I'm like, oh, I like this kid. Okay, so we got a good cast going. So now I'm intrigued with with where we're starting off.
Hmm. And you're right. Toni Collette can do anything, and I know I saw a quote from her saying like she was trying to get away from a lot of the serious movies at this point, but then she read this script and kind of fell for it. Um, right after this or shortly after this, she did Knives Out, and you could tell she was having so much fun in that. It's just this like
Right.
goofy, pseudo Gwyneth Paltrow type character, uh, sort of thing that she had going on. Um,
Right.
but she has a lot of range and she's very good. But I was kind of with you when I saw Gabriel Byrne, which I had no idea he was in this, because all the marketing I'd seen, they only ever show Toni Collette. They show Milly Shapiro, the daughter.
Yep.
We're gonna get to her, by the way. But Gabriel Byrne showing up made me realize, oh, we've got something here, because he's very selective about what he does. Gabriel Byrne is
Exactly.
not one that will just take any offer. I remember,
hmm
I love the movie The Usual Suspects. He almost didn't do that
Yes.
movie. They had to hound him to do the movie and basically agree, all right, we'll shoot it in LA, even though half the story takes place in New York and all this kind of stuff,
hmm
just to get him on there, and which is worth it because he's amazing in that movie. But
Yeah.
so when I see him in something, I'm like, okay, he isn't just taking a role to take a role. He's really selective.
Right.
And then Alex Wolff, who completely forgot he was in Pig, and I just saw Pig not that long ago, last year. Um, and like he's so good in
hmm
in that, but he again powerhouse performance in this movie. He was so
Oh yeah.
like it's just Ari Aster got such great performances out of those three, and then Milly Shapiro, who's basically making her film debut. She'd been acting for a few years because
Okay.
she started. One of her first major acting gigs was Matilda on Broadway, I want to
Okay.
say.
hmm
Um, but he got these just amazing performances out of them, and I couldn't. Then when I saw, I'm like, okay, they had to have been up for some. I didn't remember Toni Collette being up for an Oscar, but I'm like, she had to have been up for some kind of an award. Nothing, no, none of the big
Yeah.
awards like that, which is just that's such a snub because she carries this movie, and that's saying something with Alex
hmm
Wolff and Gabriel Byrne. Gabriel Byrne, who puts in like that character of Steve, is just that guy goes through so much in this movie, and the performance is perfect. And
Yeah, and you can't help but, well, at least I couldn't help but identify with Steve because he's, you know, all of these things are happening and he's trying to just keep the family together. He's
yep,
like just trying to be the glue as all of these pieces are just like flying all over the place. So, you know, I completely identified with him, and
Oh yeah.
every any strife that he went through, I'm like, dude, I know how you feel. I know how you feel.
Yeah, and then to find out, like I found out after the fact, because it's not really explicitly said, his character is a psychologist.
Hmm.
And I didn't realize that watching the movie. So he's watching all of these people in his life unraveling in front of him, and he's trying to figure it out at the same time, which just like adds another layer to what that character is doing throughout this movie. Because I noted, like, a lot of times it's very tropey, and especially horror movies, to have the husband either be clueless or
Yep.
a dick, right? He's either they're either clueless and don't understand or believe whatever's going on, or they're just mean spirited towards the family, or they don't care, or that kind of thing. And Steve is none of those things. He cares. He cares
Right.
about. He especially cares about Peter,
Yep.
and he's worried for Annie, and he wants to keep things together, and he's very supportive of her. You know, when she gets up in the middle of the night to go sleep in the treehouse, and he knows that's what she's doing, and he's like, "Look, fine. Just if you get cold, come back inside, please." Like, he's not
Right.
gonna, because he knows trying to stop her is not going to help at all, and he needs to let her
Mhm.
do that. So yeah, I just love that. And then Milly Shapiro, who, okay,
Oh,
so the marketing for this, because I had seen some trailers, they pulled a total psycho on us. They pulled a
yes.
Janet Leigh, because she is all over all of the marketing.
Yep.
And if you haven't seen the movie yet, it's too late. We're going to spoil everything for it, so deal with that.
Yeah, we have to say, if you haven't seen Hereditary yet and you like good movies, like again, I've said I'm not a horror movie fan at all,
Mm-hmm.
but I like a good story that
Yep.
has horror elements. This movie is that. It is actually. Spoiler alert. I'm gonna say this movie is amazing. I was blown away by it. So yeah, if you haven't seen it, watch it. Definitely watch it.
Yep. And if you haven't seen it yet and you don't want to be spoiled, go ahead, pause, go watch it. It's on HBO Max, and then come back and listen to us talk about it.
Yes.
But I was in no way prepared for what happened to the character of Charlie, and it caught me completely off guard.
Hmm.
You know, most of the movie, they're really signposting everything, and they're kind of spoon feeding you all the information. There's no like major holy cow revelations, because they're
Yeah.
leading to it the whole time, and it's just this slow burn and slow unraveling of everything going on. But that particular scene, when she, because they're leading you up to, they've mentioned her her nut allergy already with
Right.
chocolate, and
Yep.
you see the person at the party chopping all the walnuts.
Yep.
So it's like, you know what's coming. She's going to eat some of that, and she's going to have an allergic reaction.
Yep.
That all made sense. As soon as she rolls that window down and starts leaning out the window, and I'm like, and then that happened. I was like, holy cow. I mean, I just didn't see it coming at all. It was,
That's it was at that point where I'm like, because again, like you, I watched the marketing. I figured it's a movie's about Toni Collete and her young daughter.
yep.
And then when that happened, I'm like, what have I done? Like, what movie? Why did I pick this movie? I feel like I've done something, because I had no idea that was coming, and it took me so off guard. But then on the other hand, I'm like, oh, we are playing for real on
Mm-hmm.
this movie. Now I am like, because as you said, they're kind of teasing you little pieces of what's going on. And I'm watching the movie and I'm taking notes. I'm like, okay, where is this going? Where is this going?
Mm-hmm.
And then when you get to that part where it's just shocking, I was like, okay, we are in for keeps. I don't know where this movie is going, but I am all in, because they are doing a different type of storytelling that I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, they are not messing around. Nobody is safe now. You don't know what's going to happen to any character. Anything could happen. And it was just like, I just can't get over how much that particular scene affected me. And then moving forward, now it's like, okay, now we got a whole different movie happening. Now it's not what I
Right.
was set up for at all. And it's one of those where the way that scene played out, you see everything right up until they cut away as she's hitting the pole.
Mm-hmm.
And from then on, then you get like almost a minute of just a close up on Peter's face in the car.
Yes.
You get that one quick look in the rearview mirror, but then he looks away because he can't bring himself to like really look. And then we're just there with Peter in that moment for the next minute.
Mm-hmm.
And it's rough. Like, this movie is rough. It does not pull any punches. And for him to then just be in this fugue state as he drives home. Now, I did read some internet trivia, so take it with a grain of salt.
Okay.
That was based on a thing that actually happened. That there was some people went to a party, got really drunk, driving home. One of them started to feel sick, leaned their head out the window, and that happened. And the person actually did drive home like that, in that kind of shocked state, and just go to bed. But that, for as ridiculous as that sounds, I also can conceive of that happening because like the shock of that moment, and you have like no way to react. You have no idea how to react to that. And he just,
you can see how that would happen in real life because they're driving on a road. There's not, there's no street lights. So, the only light that's coming is from his car. So when he sees, a dead animal in a road, which, we've all seen that before. His natural instinct is to swerve out of the way, not realizing that his sister's head is out the window.
yeah.
And when, and like you said, when we're just stuck on his face, because again, I watched that scene and I'm like, what just happened? Like, what exactly happened? And you're just stuck with Peter's face, and it's excruciating because you're dying to know exactly what did I just watch?
Mm-hmm.
What did I just see? And you get the answer through Toni Collette's screaming, through Annie's reaction to it.
Yeah.
And that is just brutal.
Which also brilliantly we don't see right away either. Like, this movie, Ari Aster did something in here that I thought was brilliant, which was the things he didn't show us throughout the movie. We get all this reaction, and then it's him coming home, mindlessly walking upstairs, laying down in his bed, and we're still waiting, and then we get the next morning, and we hear her get out of bed, go downstairs, get to the car, and then she discovers the body, and then she starts screaming, and we still never see her. A different type of movie. Right. And this is where I both understand and kind of want to buck against like elevated horror, because a different horror movie is going to show us Annie discovering the body. Right. Is going to show us her reaction right away because we are supposed to be in that moment with her. But in this case, this movie wants us in the moment with Peter.
Right.
And so all we're getting is his experience of it. And that's the other thing that as the movie unfolded, I realized, this is Peter's story. This is all focused on Peter. And to be there with him while we're hearing his mother letting out just this animalistic scream as she discovers her daughter, her baby, dead like that, is just insane. And then when it finally does cut away and show the aftermath of the accident, we stick on that shot forever. And shout out to the prop department and their special effects guys, because that was a hell of a head that they had. Yeah. And of course, anytime you put ants and bugs crawling over something like that's going to make it even creepier. And boy, they did. It's just, I'm just like, did we really need to stick on it for that long? But at the same time, yes, like we did. And it's rough. It's real rough. But when you watched it, did you notice the shot earlier that showed the pole and the symbol on the light pole?
I did. They did focus on that, but I thought they did it. I don't know if they did it earlier or later, but they did once, because the first thing that I was paying attention to was the necklace that the grandmother had.
Yes.
When she's laying down. And I'm like, that's a weird looking necklace. And they do a close up of it. I'm like, that's odd. And then you instantly see Annie standing there with the exact same necklace. So I'm like, all right, that symbol means something. Yeah. And then they showed the pole and you can faintly see it, but that symbol is there. But I don't remember if that was before or after the accident.
It was on their way to the party. They drive past
Okay.
it and the camera's panning and it stops for a second and it shows you that. And it's one of those things where, again, they're giving you all this information of like,
Right.
then after things happen, you can then go back and reconstruct it and be like, oh yeah, okay, they told us about that. You know, when Annie sits down with the support group and she starts talking, and
Yep.
she starts giving the whole history of the mental health of her family and things that have happened in their family, they're laying out half the plot of the movie right there, but you don't really realize it until you think about it towards the end of like, oh, the whole thing with her brother at 16,
Yes.
and then the note saying, you know, you tried to put someone inside me, and they diagnosed that as schizophrenia. Probably not schizophrenia after all. Like, turns out he was telling the truth there. And
Yeah, yeah.
um,
One of the other things that I really liked about this movie is that it starts off. The opening shot is not just a house, but the very beginning is the obituary
yep.
for the grandmother,
Mhm.
and it tells you all of the details. These are the list of the characters that you have to kind of pay attention to.
Yep.
And then once I realized that, I'm like, okay, so there's the grandmother and there's the her brother Charlie, and then when she talks about Charlie and talks about grandma was trying to put someone inside of him or whatever, it's like, oh, okay, so now it's all starting to make sense. They give you all of the little clues. It's just a matter of can you focus on these clues when they're shocking you with killing the sweet little girl that you're just like, oh, she just wants to hang out in the treehouse.
Yeah, and at the same time, like this girl who, there's a whole other angle where she was, you know, she talks about how grandma wanted me to be born a boy, and
Mhm.
her name's Charlie. And we see that the grandma, you know, later on we find that the grandma would knit these like floor mats and put names on them.
Yeah.
And for Charlie's, it was Charles.
And see, I thought that that was for the brother,
I'm
like
pretty
the
sure because it
for.
was, they had a Peter and Charles,
Mhm.
I think, or
Oh, okay.
maybe it was Annie and Charles. But it's like
Yeah, that's
they wanted that, like, so there's the whole thing of Annie and her mom were estranged when Peter was born, and
right.
Peter was supposed to be like the vessel, but
Right.
but grandma couldn't get a hold of him, so instead she got Charlie, and you know, was trying to manipulate Charlie and move Charlie into being the vessel, which ended up not working. Like it wasn't the thing that they wanted. So now, years down the road, the cult's going in a different direction, because there's the whole cult angle of everything and that symbol for payment. And it's like, whoa, okay, we got a whole lot, you know, now we got more to unpack. As that happens,
Yes.
you meet
Mhm.
Joan, who, again, the movie's very smart. Joan is in that first scene in the support group, but we never
Right.
meet her.
Right.
But if you go back and watch it, you see her sitting there. And then
Hmm.
you meet her, and she comes up with this whole story of, you know, because I don't believe her story of her grandson drowning in a lake. Like, none of that's true. She's just making
Hmm.
that up to create a grief story that she can connect to Annie with in order to draw her in. And there's even subtle things, like when she runs into her in the parking lot of the art supply store, and she's telling her about the seance and all that. If
Yeah.
you look in the back of her car, she just bought those chalkboards that she then says was, you know, her grandson's favorite item was that chalkboard. She just bought them.
Right.
The movie's like, no, check this. Like, again, there's some of that really clever filmmaking where the movie's just like, here's what happened right in front of you.
Yep.
And
Yep.
now you can see it again that second time through. That's good
You know,
filmmaking, good writing.
one of the other to speak on that point, elements that I liked was Annie's miniature sets
Mm-hmm.
that she was building, the little miniature houses, because there's that one image of her breastfeeding Charlie, and
Yeah.
then the grandmother off to the side, ready to breastfeed Charlie too. And I'm like, what is happening? Like, what does this clue mean? And you find out again, they give you that little nugget, and then when you get to the end of the story, you know exactly what that was for.
Mm-hmm. The miniatures, the opening shot, panning across that room and seeing all of the little doll houses, and then pushing
Yep.
in on the last one, and having that dollhouse room then become our reality
Mhm.
as Steve walks in to give Peter his suit for the funeral
Right.
was so well done, and such a cool, not only visual but also storytelling element of like, these people are just dolls inside of a house. They have no
Yep.
that, and because that theme runs throughout it. If you listen to the lectures going on in Peter's classrooms, they're talking about
Yeah.
Heracles and how Heracles didn't really have any say in what was going on. He was just fated to do these things, and they
Yep.
keep cutting to these doll houses and all this kind of stuff. And I thought that was brilliant, but I also love that first shot. It's very clearly a dollhouse. And then when they
Yeah.
get to the actual full-on frame, it's a set they built that still looks like the dollhouse. Like
I
the
was
I
I was
love
wondering
that.
because as I'm watching the scene, and you can tell, if you watch enough movies, you can tell exactly what is going to happen as soon as the camera pans away and you see the dollhouse
Mhm.
and you're zooming in on a room. You're like, okay, eventually they're going to transition this into like a real room. And I I watch movies, so I know how special effects work. And I'm watching, and I'm waiting to find that point where it switches over, and you can bear. I watched it twice. That one scene,
Mhm.
no, three times. I watched it three times. Just that one scene. You can't tell. You can't. It blends so smoothly in there, and I'm like, all right, this guy, this film director he's aiming for something. He's taking a big swing, and you can tell that there's some real like vision behind the camera. So
Yes.
I really really enjoyed that.
And it was smart too. I did read they built the house itself. All the sets for the interiors of the house were all built on sound stages, specifically so he could pull walls out and ceilings off and get all his cameras where he wanted them to be for all his different shots. And like Toni Collette said, he was one of the most prepared directors she's ever worked with. Like, he had
Mhm.
everything plotted out and storyboarded and like shot in his head before they
Yeah.
started doing the movie. And for this to be a feature film debut, I buy that, because there's so much attention to detail to all of these shots that he has, and you can tell it's somebody who like knew the visual he wanted, and he was able to
Mhm.
translate that into the camera. And it's something as simple as building a second set that looks like a dollhouse, like where the tripod with the coat hanging over the telescope
Yeah.
it looks like it's a cardboard cutout with the way that it's painted and everything, and like the
Mhm.
background, the closet in the background is just doesn't quite look like it's in reality, but yet it is in a
Right.
set that Gabriel Byrne is walking through.
Yeah.
Is great, because then when we see his room later, it looks exactly like that, but now we're seeing just the set that they built for it. It's like,
Right.
it's just really, really brilliant. And to use tilt shift photography for some of the exterior shots, when
Mhm.
you would see, a shot of the mountain and they would shoot it tilt shift so it looks like a miniature, but
Yeah.
it's not. It's a shot outside. That kind of stuff
Mhm.
is really cool. Match cuts that he would do where you would see.
Oh my God, the match cuts. Woo!
So you're like me.
Amazing.
You love a good match cut, and there was a couple of like exterior ones, and then there was the one of Peter sitting up in his bed, and then they match cut him
Ed.
into the high school classroom.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing.
So, it's just, those are the types of things, like, that's flashy, and but it's so cool looking, and it's such a, it, like, odd camera moves, Dutch tilts, that kind of stuff are all
Mhm.
these things to make you feel unsettled. There's a great one where Annie comes up into the hallway and the shot's upside down, and it's the camera
Yes.
panning all the way around as she walks underneath it, and then it goes to right side up, and then the camera comes down to the level that she's at. So it starts off above her
Mhm.
and comes like, that's great,
It's
because
very unsettling.
it puts you in this weird mood, and
Mhm.
it does that without you consciously thinking about, wow, this just, this is weird. It's just like, this is weird, but you're also drawn into the dynamic nature of the shot. And
Yes.
that's where
Yep.
also I think building those sets and being able to pull a wall out so you can get an impossible camera move, or the shot at the cemetery at Charlie's burial, where it's this long. There was a lot of
Mhm.
long shots in this movie, which I appreciate.
Yep.
A long shot, and then everything is framed very small in it, so you feel you get this feeling of being an outsider looking
Yeah.
in on the events that are going on, and then that camera slowly moving down and going underground.
Yes.
And it's just all these little things. I also like, this was kind of cool, and I forgot to mention this before, but Gabriel Byrne and Alex Wolff had worked together on a previous project,
Okay.
a TV series I want to say, or something, where they were playing father and son. And
Oh, okay.
Alex Wolff knew Milly Shapiro from, they went to a school together at some point, so they knew each other.
Okay.
So those three all knew each other ahead of time, but Toni Collete didn't know any of them. She hadn't worked with them before, so that could kind of play into this whole idea of her feeling like an outsider within her own family that we slowly get this feeling of as the story is unfolding.
Yeah.
And that's part of the great writing, but also her performances. It starts off, she just seems like a normal mom, kind of doing the best that she can, but
Right.
then there's like that dinner scene after Charlie's death. Boy, that's the one where I was like, how did she not get like even a nomination for this performance? Because that whole scene, there's so much going on there.
Yeah, and I do kind of remember there being a little bit of a backlash of her not getting any kind of nomination for this movie, and to me, I'm just like, yeah, whatever. It's a horror movie, yeah, whatever. people just want to promote anything to do it to just to promote something. Who cares?
Mhm.
But yeah, after watching this movie, I was reminded how much I loved her in The Sixth Sense,
Yep.
where she, also plays a grieving mother or a mother that's, coming to terms with her past. Uh, but yeah, she has that scene at the dinner table, and then the dream sequence where, uh, she's telling Peter that, she didn't want to have him, and all of the elements that came after that.
Mm-hmm.
Just amazing. She turns in an amazing performance in a really good movie. And yes, she should have gotten some sort of recognition other than like, oh, it's Toni Collette doing Toni Collette things.
Like, yeah, she definitely deserved more. And it's the type of thing where, because this movie is about grief, it's about dealing
Yep.
with grief and how it affects everyone differently, but how it affected this particular family. And then you layer on top of that, oh, by the way, there's also this outside influence that's manipulating everything and pushing it towards
Right.
something that they don't even realize is happening. Like, Annie doesn't understand what's going on because
hmm
none of it is within any of her control. And on top of that, the demon deity thing that is behind all of it just doesn't have a logic that makes any sense to humans. So,
Yeah.
there's that aspect of it too. You've got, it's manipulating her in order to make Peter vulnerable to what's going
Right.
on. So it's using her as a tool to get to Peter instead of directly going after Peter, which is, I think, a much more effective way to do that. And it's also a much harder thing to try to stop because you don't understand it. As far as she understands, whatever's going on is happening to her.
Right.
And she doesn't realize what it's doing to Peter, what it's doing to Steve, what it was doing to Charlie. How
Yeah,
her,
it's
like, all of that.
it's crazy. It's crazy to think that the grandmother was also like was also playing a part of that. That
Mm-hmm.
the grandmother was kind of putting these pieces into play to get to this, to pretty much torture her daughter to get to what the other thing is of
Yeah.
them bringing forth this evil deity. Um, and it kind of makes me want to know a little bit more about the grandmother. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Because there's this complete cult of people that must have loved her and worshipped her. Because and he says at the funeral, there's so many people here, and
Yeah.
my grandmother was very like private and did her rituals and had her own thing. So it's kind of odd that all of these people are here, and these people are just kind of like smiling at Charlie, and I'm like, what is the grandmother's story? Like, what is her
Yeah.
story? So the fact that she's putting these pieces into place, um, and almost not even giving a crap about her daughter. She's like,
Nope.
whatever, make a son, get pregnant, have a son, and let grandma do her thing. Like let grandma finish her business. It's very uncomfortable thinking about that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And you can tell like she passed some of the again with Hereditary, some of what she did to Annie is then getting passed down to Peter and Charlie unknowingly. Like Annie's not
Right.
doing these things consciously, but it's happening. And then you throw in things like the sleepwalking and waking up to both her kids doused in paint thinner and she's covered in it with a match in her hand. Like
Right.
that was not something I was prepared for when she told that story. Um, and it goes and goes and goes. And like you mentioned, the creepy people at the funeral, that the blonde dude with the creepy smile,
Yeah.
smiling at Charlie, and then you don't see that person again at all until right at the end of the movie, and he's standing in a doorway, grinning exactly like that at Peter, stark naked. And I was like, "What is that? No, no, no! You stay right there. You don't move." Like because it's a slow burn of a movie. Like the first hour, the
Yeah.
only thing that happens is the inciting incident with Charlie and Charlie's beheading coming home from the party. But the rest of the movie is taking its time telling this story and setting us up and making us see what's going on, and then as it goes and as things start to ramp up, it just goes more and more and more. And
Yeah.
but they're doing the crazy stuff right from the beginning. Like there's an early scene where Annie is in her workroom and thinks she sees her mom standing in the corner.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Can I just talk about the lighting in
Yes,
this movie?
please do.
Because I'm again, horror movies are not my jam. I'm a little bit of a punk, so I will watch a movie with all of the lights on, in the daytime, with the sun shining in, because that's how my brain works.
Sure.
One time I tried to watch The Shining. The Shining is a classic movie. I'm like, I've seen this movie before. I can watch this movie in the dark. It's fine. And then about, I don't know, 25 minutes into it, I'm like, nope, turn on lights. All
Yep.
lights are coming on.
No shame in that.
So so this one, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna be prepared for it. Uh, all the lights are on. I'm watching it in the daytime. Just making sure that that I'm safe in my
Right.
environment.
Absolutely.
But there's so many cool scenes where, like you were saying, the guy with the blonde hair, kind of just standing there smiling. You can't really see what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
You can make it out, but you can't. There isn't a lot of light shown on it, and the the way that I don't know, the way that the lighting is set up in this movie, it makes you really have to focus on what you're looking at, because it's like, am I seeing what I think I'm seeing? And that scene where she's in the room and she sees her mother, the ghost of her mother, that
Yeah.
it creeped me out, and
Oh
I
yeah.
wasn't quite sure. And I'm like, because that's it. I would think that if you were in a room and you did see a ghost, it would be a lot like that, where you're not quite sure what you're looking at, but you know it's something there, and then as soon as you try to get a little bit of clarity, it's gone.
Yep.
So that scene, and it happens right at the beginning of the movie, played really real to me, and that's when I was like, oh, maybe I'll turn on a few more lights.
Yeah. Yeah. It was Pavel Pogrzewski, I think. I'm butchering the name, but he was the director of photography. He did the cinematography for it, and his
Okay.
lighting was just immaculate. Because exactly that.
Yeah.
It's sort of that catching something out of the corner of your eye. You're not exactly sure it's there.
Hmm.
It's almost slightly transparent, and then the light comes on, and no, it's not there. And whatever's
Right.
behind it somewhat kind of looks like it maybe could have been what you were seeing. There's when
Hmm.
Peter is hallucinating in his bedroom and he thinks he sees Charlie, and then it's just a sweatshirt over a chair.
Yeah.
Same thing. But then later on, he does see Charlie, but it's a ball that falls instead of her head falling off, and like all of that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. But the one that got me, all right, the one that got me, because there is a really great shot in this when Peter discovers his dad. So by this time, Gabriel Byrne's character Steve had burned, which that was a
Hmm.
great scene. Well, in
Yeah.
so much as like it was it was this scene where she is trying desperately to get him to believe her and understand what she's saying, and he has kind of reached the end of sort of what he has to give in terms of all of that. He just doesn't have any
Right.
more. He's out of, his tank is empty. And he's listening to her, and she is just pleading with him because she knows when she tried to burn the book, it set her on fire. She's worried that it'll try to do that again. And then she finally makes the self-sacrifice, throws the book in the fire, and he, boom, bursts into flames.
Yeah, like that.
Yeah. So when Peter finds him, there's that great shot where you're just seeing in the foreground, out of focus, are Steve's hands and like his corpse there, and we're looking at Peter, and in the background you see Annie up in that ceiling.
Right.
And it's a great shot because they show you Peter, and then they do a rack focus very slowly to put her into focus in the background, and then they slowly rack focus back to Peter, and they're drawing your attention to the fact that she's back there. That's not the creepy one. The creepy one is before that.
One before that,
when you didn't see her, because when he's in his bedroom and he sits up on his bed, she's behind him in that shot, but it's so dark that you can't see it right away. But it's then when the shot flips and she crawls out of the room that I kind of did I grabbed my chair and did a jump back like, oh, what the hell was that? Because
that was, I didn't quite catch her at the beginning. That's another scene that I watched twice.
Yep.
I didn't catch her at the beginning above his head.
No.
Because again, it's one of those movies that you can solve this problem very easily, and I might do this moving forward, just turning the contrast up on your TV.
Exactly. Just crank the brightness all the way up when you're watching it.
Yeah, that might help. But so I didn't see her at the beginning, but I did see something go past Peter in the background. It looked like a sheet or something, and I'm like, oh, I wonder what that was. I wonder if that's going to come into play later. And so I did go back and watch that scene, and that's when I noticed her, and I'm like, oh Jesus, she's like right there. And then when they show her, the sheet that like moves away is actually her like crawling or flying or something.
Yeah, but sideways.
Yeah, it was like almost like Spider-Man crawling on a wall, but sideways, but flying also.
Yeah,
it was very unnerving.
Very unnerving. And the whole last 20 minutes is just one unnerving moment after another, because that's when then he goes downstairs and he sees his dad, and you see her hanging out up behind there, and then we get naked smiling guy in the corner, and then it cuts back and she's gone, but then all of a sudden she comes running out of somewhere else and chases him, and he goes running up to the attic. And this movie earned every jump scare that it had, and it didn't overdo them. There were no cheap ones. Nothing was just a jump scare for the sake of a jump scare. It all served what was going on. But man, did they work. Because when she comes running at him,
oh, that was the moment for me. That was the moment where my popcorn went flying across the room, and I'm like, oh Jesus, because they set that scene up so well. Like you said, they show her, so you know where she is, and then you don't know where she is, and you're looking directly at her and not knowing it. And then when she comes out, it's like, oh, you better run, Peter. And the way the camera just follows him, like, let's go. Oh, it's fantastic.
And then for him to run, and he gets up into the attic and he pulls the door closed, and you're hearing her banging on it, and then we get the shot of her and she's on the ceiling banging her head on there. And I was like,
oh, brutal.
And the way they frame that, and again, it's those just weird camera angles and framing it in such a way that it just looks unnatural. But then the brutal part was right after that, because then when the banging stops and then he's looking around and you're seeing yet more creepy naked people in the attic just kind of hanging out, and you start to hear that sound, and then there's Annie floating in the attic with the piano wire as she slowly works that back and forth, and they again
keeps going.
Yeah, but again, they signposted that because they showed the piano knocked over in a shot earlier, but you're not paying attention to it. It's in the foreground, out of focus. When he's coming down the stairs in the earlier scene, and he's taking forever to walk down those stairs, but in the foreground, out of focus just a little bit, knocked over, is the piano that they had.
Oh, wow.
And again, it's one of those just like, you brilliant bastard. You told us what was going on. You gave away the whole gag, but yet you don't know. And then you see that, and that's another one of those scenes, much like when they cut back to Charlie's head on the side of the road where they stuck on it for so long. Yep. The scene with Annie and the piano wire just keeps going and going, and you're stuck in this moment. And you like, as a film watcher, you can't get out of it without turning the movie off. The movie's going to make you sit there, and the tension is ratcheting up, and the music, which we haven't even talked about, the music's getting more and more intense. And then he's watching this happen, and then he looks over, and again, bunch of just old naked people staring at him and smiling like crazy. He did the thing that, it was a very reasonable response. Run and jump headfirst out a window. Like, I'm
exactly.
I'm out.
He's like, I've seen this in John Wick. This is totally going to work. I'm going to run and dive through the window. And it doesn't quite work.
Not quite. And there was a very subtle thing in the next shot, and I didn't notice it the first time I watched it. And I did watch the scene again. And that's after he's dove out the window. First of all, you get the long shot, and you're still hearing her working the piano wire before it finally kind of snaps and you hear the thud.
The thud.
Because that was
awesome. The
music and the sound design in this movie were on point. They just, nothing was overlooked. But when they do the overhead shot and they show Peter laying there after he's jumped out the window, there's a very subtle thing where you see a shadow come off of his body, and then you see that light come down and sort of enter. And it was very subtle, like subtle enough I didn't notice it the first time, but when I was kind of rewatching parts and watching some breakdowns, and I saw that, and I was like, oh, that's yet again, like, that's just really, there was some, because there were moments where that light effect was very apparent and they really drew your attention to it. And then there's other times where it was very subtly done.
Yeah, and I was wondering, this movie is going to be a lot of fun for me to go back and rewatch. Now that I know where the story was heading, because I really want to pay attention to that light, because it would come up in certain scenes, and I wasn't quite sure, like, if it was supposed to just lead characters places or what it really meant. But there's that one scene, it's towards the end, with Annie's character, where the light just kind of leaves her, and then it's like she was hypnotized. It's like she was in a trance.
Oh yeah,
and she just kind of goes back to normal. And I'm like, what does that light really, really mean? So I definitely want to go back and rewatch it, just so I could get a little bit more understanding of how that light was working, because it did it from the ending. It looks like it was the demon itself, and it went inside of Peter, and Peter's back as the eighth king of hell or whatever. Was.
I think that is the idea. We're supposed to think that is Payman, moving about and manipulating and showing people stuff and trying to draw them in whatever direction it wants them to go. But yeah, it was just the subtle way they would use it. There was a really good one too earlier on when the paint bottle gets knocked over, and it's very obviously. Like, at first, you're supposed to kind of maybe think that maybe she knocked it over, but it's clearly not her. But in the background of that shot, right before it happens, you see the light come through the window. There's a little flash of that light in the window, and then she reaches over, and then you watch the paint bottle fall over. It's like, those are some of the little subtle ones that, again, when you watch it again, you're going to notice that. And you're going to be like, oh, man, how did I... You don't see it. You don't consciously see it that first time. And that's one of the really cool things that this movie does.
Yeah.
And then,
in that aspect, I was thinking it was, because you're following Annie's character, so you're thinking this is going to be a ghost story. You think that she's going to use the seance to connect to her daughter, and that's the direction that it's going. So all of these clues are leading you in that direction. So you don't think of, at least I didn't think of it as being evil. I thought of it being, oh, this is how we're going to get to the other character and the seance and the chalkboards and all of that stuff. Not knowing it was part of an evil plan from the very beginning.
Yeah, this movie really plays with expectations of kind of what you think is going to happen, and turns them a little bit on their head, which is really great. And then on top, like we mentioned the music, but the music in this, there isn't like a definite theme. It's it's not a musical score like a John Williams score, right? Where you're going to be like humming it or you're going to remember it, but it's so effective in this movie for whatever scene is going on. Colin Stetson did the music, and it's just phenomenal. Like the shot where he's leaving the party with her and he's driving fast.
Yep.
Like that music, I think I even had I had the note to myself was just like tense music. Like this music is making you tense the whole time, and it's building and building and building. And then there's other times where it's very discordant and it's just kind of weird sounds going on to play with your head. And like everybody involved in this was bringing their A game, and it starts with Ari Aster. Like Ari Aster just knew what he wanted to do and got what he wanted out of everybody. And I still just can't wrap my head around the fact that this is a feature film debut. Like it just that just doesn't seem fair. Like
it's really good to see when you watch a movie and you can tell that you're in the hands of a storyteller that really knows what they're doing. Like everything is very particularly placed where it is for a reason. You know what I mean? And it's I don't know, it just seems, so many movies are like cookie cutter. And I hate to I hate to be the guy that talks crap about horror movies, because I don't. But the thing about regular horror movies for me is that you have to trick your brain, or you have to have your brain work so that when characters do dumb things, you just have to expect it. It's like watching a musical. People are going to break out in song and dance, and your brain has to be like, okay, I will accept this. Evil Dead Rise, which is a horror movie that a lot of people liked, these characters are, as I'm watching the movie, these characters are dumb. It's like they live in a world where horror movies don't exist. And if you pick up something that's clearly evil, don't mess with it. But they're like, ooh, what is this thing? And I'm like, all right, obviously I have to train my brain to know that these people are idiots, and what is going to happen to them, they deserve it. So it's nice to have a movie where, again, it's a horror movie or has horror elements, but it's, the storytelling is there. The storytelling is the basis of that. And then you have the performances on top of that, so that when you get to the third act and it just turns into batshit insanity, it's like, oh, this is the ride that this director wanted us to go on, and I am here for it. Totally here for it.
Yep, because you're right. A lot of times, horror movies, action movies ask you to do this quite a bit. Shut your brain off and just enjoy, right? Fast and the Furious, physics has no place in those movies. They're just going to do what they want to do. And you can shut your brain off, you can watch it, and you can just be like, that's cool spectacle. I enjoy that.
Right.
Horror movies, same way. You can shut your brain off and just be like, nope, it's cool. I'm going to root for this guy with a machete because these kids are doing dumb shit. And that's fine. One thing that has helped me a lot is to make myself remember that all of these movies, or most of these horror movies, exist in a world where the horror movies don't exist, right? Halloween takes place in a world where they don't have the Halloween movies. They don't have Friday the 13th. So when it's why did you stop beating on the guy? He's on the ground. He's going to get back up. Those people don't know that because they don't have that frame of reference that we do as an audience. Except for Scream, because Scream has the whole meta thing going on, which is why, for the most part, in the Scream movies, they don't make dumb decisions like that, because that was one of the things that Kevin Williamson and Wes Craven really wanted was, no, this is a smarter horror movie in that our characters aren't just going to do the dumb things that most will do. Another thing that this movie did, and I appreciate this so much, is the writing of conversations feel like conversations that happen between real people and not characters in a horror movie.
Yeah.
Toni Collete and Alex Wolff talking about going to the party felt to me like a conversation I would have had with my mom at that age. Of like, I want to go to hang out at this thing. Well, is there going to be drinking? We're not old enough to get anything. And she's like, that's not what I asked. I asked if you were going to be drinking. Like, that was such a good, even the whole thing of like, is your sister going to go? I don't know. Does she want to go? She's like, I don't know. Did you ask her? Like, that feels like real. That's a real conversation. It's really, it's nice to see that in a movie.
Yeah. Yeah, that did not feel like a script at all. That felt like it definitely felt like a real life conversation, especially if you've kind of been around situations like that before.
Hmm. Even the whole dinner scene where she's yelling at him and he's yelling at, like, the way they did it never felt melodramatic and written. It felt like, and that's what makes
Yeah,
obviously the performance plays into that so much, but like the words that she's delivering in that performance feel like this real moment where the kid is obviously very upset. He steps up and she immediately jumps down his throat, like, don't you talk to me like that, I am your mother. And then in the middle of it, she then relents a little bit and is like, I want to try, I want to take it away from you, but I don't know how, and you won't take responsibility. And she flips it back around, and it went in these cycles. There were like cycles and movements within that conversation that just felt real, and it adds an extra layer of gravitas to kind of what's going on, and it makes you care about these characters and this story being told because they feel like real people and not written characters. And that goes a long way. That goes a long way to
yeah,
making a movie more enjoyable.
yeah. They're dealing with a lot more than just.
Yeah. Um, well, obviously, we both really enjoyed this movie. we we both liked it a
Yes,
lot. It is just, I am willing to say that this is what I would consider to be a modern horror movie kind of masterpiece. Like, I don't I don't want to jump to calling him like Stanley Kubrick, but it's that style of filmmaking. It's that care and that attention to the craft of filmmaking that I think Ari Aster and some of these younger directors that we're seeing now have. And I think part of that is having somebody like a Kubrick to study, and see what he did. You bring up The Shining. Like The Shining, for whatever faults you have and the fact that Stephen King didn't like it as an adaptation, as a movie, it's amazing because
yes,
like Kubrick knew how to do. Kubrick had an idea of what he wanted and he executed that. Whether you like it or
yep.
not, your mileage may vary, but he knew what he was doing. And I feel like that's what Ari Aster does. At least after seeing this movie. Now it makes me want to watch Midsummer.
I was just about to say that. It's very clear that he is a storyteller that happens to use horror as his debut to kind of, show what he's capable of. So it does make me very interested to see how Midsummer is because he's clearly talented. Um, and like I said, he's a storyteller. So now I'm interested to see what else he has going on. I know he has another movie that just came out that hasn't been getting a lot of good reviews.
Oh, Bo is
The
Afraid?
Joaquin Phoenix one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I'm
oh
curious on
yeah,
that
I
one
don't know
too.
about that one.
Honestly, at this point though, having seen this movie, I'm willing to give him a go on those because
Yeah.
he's earned that he's earned that from me at least. Um, just based on how well this movie was crafted. He works with A24. A24 definitely puts out. They produce a lot of really good stuff. They seem to be a great incubator of some of these younger filmmakers. Really putting out good work. And
Yeah.
I mean, it just makes me want to watch more Ari Aster stuff and see if it hits the same level because I hear really good things about Midsummer. And if Midsummer
Let's just
can be as good as Hereditary, I'm all for it.
let's just hope that he's not that we don't see a repeat of the M Night Shyamalan thing where
Yeah.
we get Toni Collette in a really good movie right off the bat, and then every movie after that doesn't quite hit.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. That's amazing. Yeah, I hope not. I do feel like he's a different filmmaker, so I'm hopeful. But obviously, it's still early in his career. But if this is his first release, man, he's got a bright future ahead of him in storytelling,
Yes.
and I am excited for it. And I love seeing a movie for the first time that can really just like, because this isn't an easy movie to watch, but I also like I do want to watch it again. But there's also part of me
Yeah.
that's like, do I really want to put myself through that again? Well, now I can because I sort of know what's coming, and I can look at it from a different angle now, which I think will be great. But it's just, this was a good choice. You definitely brought something fun. Like, fun isn't the right word. You brought something interesting this time. I wouldn't call anything in this movie fun.
And I'm glad it's one, you've been doing a show for a while. I'm glad that it's one that you hadn't seen before. Because that's the one thing I was afraid of, because we both watch a lot of movies. So,
Yeah.
Finding something good that neither one of us has seen is kind of a gamble, I guess. So I'm glad that you hadn't seen it before. And I'm glad that my buddy beat him down, like really, really wanted me to check this out. Now I understand why.
Yeah, definitely. Also, this movie, if you watch Hereditary, you will never listen to somebody cluck their tongue the same way again. I can tell you that much. I've never had a jump scare from somebody just making a clucking noise like that. It was,
Yeah, that and the scene of Peter looking at his reflection at class, and his reflection just smiling evilly at him, and him like, this kid has such a great face where he's like, what is happening? He has like a great like Bill and Ted face, like what?
Yeah, and
So
meanwhile,
that scene of the face smiling back at him just creeped me out big time.
there's that, and also like all the characters showing up at the end, all those cultists. Did you notice that one of them was one of his buddies that was smoking weed with him under the bleachers?
Oh no, really?
Yeah, one of them, because the one dude under the bleachers had like a little man bun, little top knot man bun thing going on, and one of the cultists at the end that's in the treehouse, that apparently these cults don't like clothing because there's just a bunch of naked people in there, but one of them was that guy with the little top knot hanging out there. Like, again, that's just those little things that you're just like, oh man, it's so good. Even the scene where the woman Joan is yelling at Peter while he's sitting there.
Oh, right, yeah.
Like, again, that's such a weird scene because she's screaming at him from across the street, but he's the only one that hears it. So is that going on in his head? Like, is it happening in his head, or is it really happening, or is it happening in such a way that only he can hear it? Like, what's going on there? And it's so unsettling. And I mentioned the sound design, but the sound work in this movie, again, is so good because they paid so much attention to detail. And they would...
Yes.
They made that her little tongue cluck was, they would drop the sound around it and really focus and emphasize that noise, so it really struck you every time it happened, so that later on when they would use it as a jump scare, it grabs you. And there's just so much of that going on. It's brilliant movie. I mean, honestly, Ari Aster just crushes it in every aspect, and everyone involved. It is worth watching if you can handle the subject matter, which is tough. Like, I know people that I'm never going to say should watch Hereditary because it's just going to be too much for them. Yeah. Whether it's what happens to Charlie or the piano wire or just the very nature of the story going on, it's not going to work for everybody. But I tell you what, if you are a horror movie fan at all, I think it's worth it to watch this movie, because I do think there's just a whole lot of great craftsmanship going on here, and it's creepy as hell.
Yeah, there is an element of they kind of lay things out throughout the story, and because of the performances, it's very serious. Like, it's very dramatic. You take it pretty seriously, and then when you get to the third act, the supernatural stuff really kind of amps up. And I know would assume for a lot of people, once you get to that point, that might be a bridge too far. You know what I mean? Like, they might not be able to like really grasp onto why people are floating in the air or whatnot. But I think all of the other things that happen throughout the movie earns that kind of height of fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely think it's worth if the third act kind of threw you off, it's worth rewatching just to see the little breadcrumbs that are leading to that, and they lead directly to that. It's like a big neon arrow pointing right to it.
Yeah, the movie isn't subtle about it. And Daniel in the chat brings up that Random Number Generator Horror Podcast number 9, which is by the way, just a brilliant name for a podcast because you got to say that it's like a Tribe Called Quest. You got to say the whole thing. They gave Hereditary a 1 for approachability, which I get. Like it's not because this isn't an approachable film. But if you know the sensibilities of somebody enough to know that they won't be completely thrown off by what's in this movie, to get them to watch it because I think they're gonna like it. I tend to be able to watch most things, even if it's only the one time. Like I watched there was a movie called Man Bites Dog. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
I owned a Criterion version of that.
That's one of those where I saw it and I was moved by the fact that I saw it, and I never want to watch the movie again. We got done watching it, my friends and I did, and I'm like, well, I'm going to go home and take about 6 or 7 showers, and I think I'll be okay. But I can deal with that. But this is one of those movies that I think it's got a lot to say too, and it's one that you're going to bring different things away from it every time you watch it. So, and I love movies like that. It's art in the sense of like, it's telling you everything that's going on, but then you get to draw your own conclusions from it. And I'm noticing that as I've gotten older, I'm much more in tune to stuff like that. It's why I've started diving into like David Lynch films, which I never would have. For me, a younger version of me wouldn't be able to watch David Lynch because I'd think of it as being too pretentious and kind of too up its own ass. Yeah. But now I watch David Lynch and I'm like, no, he literally makes you ask a whole bunch of questions and then he's like, I'm not answering any of them. You figure it out. And there's something about that I love. So this kind of approaches that too, in a way. And I like that. So great choice this week for this movie. Absolutely. And
yay!
Definitely recommend it. Now, we're finishing up week 3 of So Wizard Month, which this is a fun thing to do. I love having you guys on because all of you are so different too. It's great. You all bring different things to it. But if people haven't figured it out by now, let them know where they can find So Wizard and what you guys do there.
Yeah, so every week we put out a new episode every week. We've been doing it every week for 8 years, I think, probably 8.5 years at this point. No weeks off. New episode every single week. Me, Joey, and Aubrey, we get together and we do usually movie reviews, usually brand new movies that have just come out that week, genre movies.
Mm-hmm.
We are doing Fast and the Furious, which is going to be a lot of fun. And as you mentioned, our voices are all kind of different. So when we get together to talk about something, you get different viewpoints of it. It's always fun when we all agree with something. It's always fun when more often than not we disagree, mainly because I'm a big softie. I love almost everything. Joey is very strict on things that he likes and things that he doesn't like.
Yes.
And Aubrey hates everything. So if we get Aubrey to like anything, it's always a win. So yeah, every week you can catch us. SoulWizardPodcast.com is the website. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We have a YouTube channel that Adam, our 4th member, does, and where he does like amazing interviews with indie creators, storytellers. He does some unboxings there too. Very geek related, but very cool stuff. And occasionally you'll see me and Joey and Aubrey maybe pop up on there every once in a while. But you have Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, wherever you can get podcasts, you will find So Wizard Podcast.
It's great. And I've been a guest before, and I'm looking forward to coming back sometime because that was a lot of fun. And I got Aubrey coming next week, and we have to change because she couldn't think of a movie and then finally decided on Pulp Fiction, and I was like, I've done Pulp Fiction already. So I'm bummed about that, but I've got a couple other options, and I'm gonna nail that down this week. But I'm looking forward to that because last time we watched, was it Better Off Dead?
Better Off Dead, yeah,
which was better than I had anticipated it being. So we're going in a very different direction this time, though. It doesn't sound like it's gonna be a comedy, so. We'll see. We'll see if we can see if we'll find something that she likes. But yeah, So Wizard Podcast. Definitely check it out. And I told Joey last week, and I told Adam as well, we're not going to go 2 years between having you all back on because it's too much fun to have you here.
Nice.
So definitely have you back. This show I record Sunday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and I stream it live on Twitch at twitch.tv/TV's Travis. Show comes out as a podcast on Wednesdays, anywhere you get your podcasts. You can search for Wait You Haven't Seen, or if, because my SEO is terrible, just go to tvstravis.com. You can find the feed right there. Grab it in your favorite podcatcher. You can also see other shows that I work on, like Gore, which is all horror movies. I'm a co-host on that. And it's a similar thing. We're 4 different people with different sensibilities in terms of movies. Sometimes we agree. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we get kind of a 2 versus 2 thing going on, which is always fun. So there's that. I do one on classic television, anything kind of pre-2000, called Those Were the Days. That's a lot of fun. We're in the middle of character recasts. So we're talking about shows where they recast a major character. This week we're talking about Roseanne when they recast Becky, which will be fun. So yeah, definitely tvstravis.com to check that out. You can also find merch there, Patreon for this show if you want to join that for as little as $1 an episode. All of that kind of stuff. And I'll be back next week with Aubrey. Possibly another Tarantino movie. We'll see. It won't be Pulp Fiction, but there was another one on her list that we might do. There's a couple things. So keep an eye on Twitter.
I love Aubrey, but Wait You Haven't Seen is literally like the question we ask her every single week on the show because she hasn't seen anything.
That's what Joey was telling me, so it's perfect. But I'm TV's Travis on Twitter. Check there. I will be posting as soon as we decide on a movie as well. So, Mark, thank you so much for being here. This was so much fun. I had a great time.
Oh, thank you for inviting us. Thank you for doing So Wizard Month. And it's always good to talk movies to someone that's not Joey and Aubrey that, might be able to, to understand a little bit where I'm coming from when I have to describe something.
Absolutely. So until next week, and whatever movie Aubrey and I decide we're going to watch, this has been Wait You Haven't Seen. Let's be excellent to each other.
Well, that's a crock. I'm just asking if you're drinking.
Well, it just answered no.